Santiago Espinal could be an affordable, yes, Jeffrey, I said the word affordable, an affordable insurance policy in 2025 for the Cincinnati Reds. I'll tell you why the Reds should keep him around on today's Locked On Reds.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Reds. My name is Jeff Carr. His name is Steve Offenbaker, and we are lifelong Cincinnati Reds fans. And we're glad that you're alongside us here today. We've been podcasting for a little over 12 years combined between the two of us, coming on, 13, 14 years, something like that, talking about these Reds every single day here on the Locked On Reds podcast that is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. I want to thank you for making us part of your day because Steve is back. Dude's been traveling all over the place, and it's great to see him. And Steve wants to fight because he disagrees with me about Santiago Espinal. So we're going to fight to start off today's episode. We're also going to look at what could the next outfielder for your Cincinnati Reds look like? What could some outfield additions this offseason look like? And where does Jake Fraley fit into all of that? Because, Jake Fraley has been a big part of this team the last couple of years. Will he continue to be in 2025? That's all coming up on today's Locked On Reds podcast that is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. All right, Steve returns. Steve's got things to say that disagree with me about Santiago Espinal? Why are you wrong, my friend? Why are you wrong?
We're going to start with Santiago Espinal because you were completely wrong. I leave you unattended for a week, and suddenly you decide that you're going to carry Phil Castellini's water for him. You're going to come out here and talk about how the poor small market Reds couldn't possibly afford to keep Santiago Espinal, and they need that money for somebody else because that $4 million is just too much for Phil. Come on, Jeff. That is $4 million worth of it. That is $4 million. You said you wanted that $4 million to be spent someplace else because maybe they could go do the pitcher, or go do the outfielder, or go do the bullpen, or go do the things because they didn't pay $4 million to Santiago Espinal. Give me a break. They need to pay the $4 million to Santiago Espinal because that is a cheap insurance policy because we don't know. We don't know. You want to label Matt McLain injury prone. We don't know. You want to say that some of these guys may or may not take steps forward in 2025. We don't know. What we do know is that Santiago Espinal can play anywhere on the infield. He can play there pretty well. And at times he can hit the ball. We know all of those things for the cool low price of $4 million. We can stash him in Louisville. He can sit down in AAA. And if something goes wonky, if something goes sideways, if they need a guy, then they've got a guy and they don't have to scramble at the low price of $4 million. You and Phil need to spend a little bit of Bob's cabbage money and stop buying into this narrative that the Reds need to save that $4 million because that's going to be the difference in going and getting Santander.
It's not about saving the $4 million. It's about using it better. They can use it better than spending it on Santiago Espinal.
They can do both things.
No,
spending
but why
$4 million
so
on Santiago Espinal.
So what are we?
Getting an outfielder.
Let's do this. What are we spending $4 million on? Last 2 years combined for Santiago Espinal, 0.1 WAR. He was 0.1 better than anyone else out there.
He was an all-star, Jeff.
4 years ago.
He was an all-star
4 years ago. Actually, 5 years ago because it's 2019. But he was an all-star a while ago. And we're talking about a guy whose slash line this season was meh. And that's even including a slash line that from July 8th through the end of the year, yes, a very nice sample size, was 311, 361, 446. He had a batting average of 311, on base of 361, slugging 446, and he still went negative for his WAR. Steve, according to Baseball Reference, he had negative 0.4 WAR. According to Fangraphs, he had 0 WAR, so that's an average of -2. I just did a little bit of looking, and since I've done the podcast, do you know who the -0.2 WAR compares to? Do you know who we're giving $4 million to in comparison? That would be Taylor Motter in 2022. That
Oh
would be
my God! I
Scott
can't believe
Heineman
that you want to
in
go
2021. That would be Josh Van Meter in 2020. That would be Dilson Herrera from 2018. Comparative in the WAR category to Santiago Espinal. Could they keep him? Yeah, but it better be for cheaper than $4 million.
No, if that's what his ARB number is, he is a arbitration eligible player that if they cut him, someone else is going to
Non-tender.
sign him.
Nah,
You,
they can have him.
you keep him around. You keep him around. You keep that insurance around. He's got multiple years of team control remaining. You keep that guy around. What was his OPS plus? He was in the 70s last year, right? 76,
79.
77, somewhere in that neighborhood. What's his career? Slightly below league average, 90s.
He has a 78 OPS plus for the last 2 seasons.
What's his career OPS plus?
91.
91. So 9% below league average, valuable backup piece that Phil Castellini can afford. Tell your buddy Phil to write the check. Write the check.
I don't, because here's the thing. All right. What's most likely to happen? I'm not defending him that he's not going to spend that money elsewhere. I think he will. The problem is what we are talking about, and there's a lot of folks that are trying to make this argument too, is that they should spend money on him and money elsewhere. Have the Reds ever done that? Have the Reds ever spent money here and there? They spend money here or there. And
well,
so
they
I'm not
didn't
going to
sign
sit here
Terry
and say,
Francona to do things the same way, boo-boo. It is time for a new way of doing things.
But I don't believe that it's well spent money if you just hand him $4 million to go be another guy that's around an 80 OPS plus. He's done that for 2 years now. He was healthy for 2 years, and he could not muster an OPS plus of 80 or better. I don't think that there's anything there. Defensively, he wasn't good either. He was negative, according to outs above average and defensive run save, so there is no argument one way or the other. And I know what I saw from him in the field. He was okay. You can get okay everywhere else. Do you know who's on the free agent list, by the way, Steve, who the Reds could go get middle infield wise? Some good guys. There's Tyro Estrada, who has been a very solid rotational middle infielder for the San Francisco Giants. There's Brandon Lau from the Tampa Bay Rays.
This is why you need me here to fight with you, because your argument is much better today. Knowing that I was going to come at you, your argument is much better today than just poor Phil can have his $4 million to pay for his convertible. And,
that was not the argument.
The argument was not
go pocket $4 million. The argument was the Reds could have X amount of payroll useful to go get guys, to keep guys.
But I'm happy. I'm happy that I'm back to pull out the good information. I have now pulled out the good information. So what you're saying is that you take that $4 million and find somebody with better peripheral numbers and better everyday numbers, and still keep an insurance policy laying around Louisville. See, that's not what you said last week, and I'm glad you came around to my way of thinking.
That is what I said. You could use it on the laundry list, the roster of available free agents. Is it going to be Juan Soto? Probably not, but he's out there. Is it going to be Cody Bellinger? Probably not, but he might be out there if he opts out. But you're going to have guys like Teoscar Hernández, Anthony Santander, Michael Conforto, Alex Verdugo, Tyler O'Neill, Jurickson Profar, and all of those guys are better than anybody that the Reds threw out in the outfield this past year. Plus, you've got all sorts of options on the pitching side of things, which we'll get into in tomorrow's episode. We want to kind of focus pitching tomorrow. This is more so about the positional side of things, because Santiago Espinal's $4 million could be used as a prohibitive measure by this ownership group that does not pay both parties. They look at one, and Nick Krall needs to make this roster better. Santiago Espinal does not make this roster better. But you know what does, Steve? You know what makes this roster better next year in 2025? Outfielders! And we're going to tell you what that looks like and who's out there for the Reds to go get coming up next. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. No matter where you're going, no matter what event you're going to, they've got great sports game tickets, whether you're going to, playoff games or football games, even basketball getting started up and things like that. Plus, you can go see shows. You can go see like a comedy event or even a concert or something like that. Game Time has tickets to everything. And just like with Reds games, like Steve and I tell you all the time, the longer you wait toward the beginning of the event, the better the price is going to be, because they've got last minute deals on all of your favorite tickets. You can download the Game Time app today and create an account and use the code LOCKEDONMLB to get $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Again, you create the account on FanDuel, use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB, and you'll get $20 off that first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time.
We're talking Cincinnati Reds here today and every day, every week, every month, all year long, 5 days a week. We're talking Reds at least 30 minutes a day with you. Make sure you click the subscribe button, click that notification bell, tell your friends, help your grandma and grandpa get on YouTube, do whatever it takes to get more people talking Reds with us, because we love talking Reds with you. All right, Jeff, you kind of alluded to this. What there is an abundance of in the free agent market is good outfielders. One, Juan Soto. He's not coming to Cincinnati. That doesn't matter how much money they throw at him.
Right.
But you threw some other names out there, and I'm gonna put it like this, Jeff. This is my identified number one need for this team, that if Nick Krall does not fill it, no matter what else he does in the offseason, he gets an F grade. That is how important signing a corner outfielder with some pop in his bat is for this team right now. Don't care what else Nick Krall does. If he doesn't fill that hole, he gets an F.
I was thinking about this the other day. We've been talking about the outfield really so very heavily since last offseason, but quite frankly, it's been a need for this team for a long, long time. I mean, you can go back to the year whenever they're like, we need a left fielder, so we'll go get Marlon Byrd. Like, don't be doing that this offseason. There are options out there that are so much better than the mid-level to low-level guys. I saw some folks talking about, just go get Tommy Pham and call it a day. I hope that was sarcastic, because that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about some dudes that have the ability to provide value on the batting side of things, on the fielding side of things, all of the above. We're not looking for half of an outfielder here, and we're not looking for a platoon option out here. We're looking for an everyday guy. And there are multiple players that are available. I mean, you're talking about Anthony Santander, a guy that we have mentioned quite a bit. He made a little bit over $11.5 million last year, so you're probably looking at a contract comparable, if not a little bit better. Maybe $13-14 million. He's 30 years old, so he's going to be betting that he's still in his prime for at least a couple more years. So his agent is going to be negotiating accordingly.
15 over 5. That's what I think that they're going to be asking 15. For. That's the neighborhood that he's going to go for. I don't know if the Reds will give him a 5-year deal, but the Reds should give him whatever they have to give him to get him to Cincinnati. He is my number one target. He is my number one go-get guy. I know Teoscar Hernández is going to be out there. He was the guy that, I was jumping up and down saying they should have went and got the year before. If you can't get Santander, then I think we take another long look at Teoscar Hernández. But that's the quality type of player. Nothing less than that is acceptable to me. One of those guys has to be the guy that you go get. Somebody that can play every day. Somebody that, at least has the threat to go yard. Somebody that could have an explosive season at Great American Ballpark. This is nothing new. This is not you and I, spending hours poring over data and cracking a code. They have needed an outfielder since forever. It has been a long, long time that they've needed to go get this outfielder. So if they're serious, if this is the new era, if the Francona era is going to be an era of winning, the very first thing you have to do is fix this problem that has existed, right there in front of everybody's faces. And it's been the elephant in the room that everybody has tried really, really hard to ignore. For crying out loud, this team played Tyler Stevenson in left field before it went out and signed a real outfielder. So the time is now. The excuses are done. They have to go get a guy.
I'm just glad you didn't throw out the fact that Santiago Espinal played time in right field and left field as part of your argument for keeping him.
He is an all-around utility player. He can give you every position on the field except catcher.
He cannot. He was very bad in the outfield. I don't want to see that ever again. And quite frankly, nobody else did ever in his career. So I don't know why the Reds decided that 2024 was the time. But that's what happened. That just underscores, though, and kind of like you mentioned, going back to your point, talking about it's been years. The Reds have not developed anybody since those years. A team that is all about the development and the drafting and the building up of players from within. They've not been able to do that. So it's time to supplement their deficiency. And there's nobody that's close. I'm looking at our minor league rankings, whether it be, MLB Pipeline or whether it be Baseball America. Nobody's got an outfielder listed anywhere close to a top level guy that you can count on. Blake Dunn was the closest that we had, and we saw him a little bit last year. And quite frankly, I didn't see a whole lot that made me think, man, he could be the guy.
There's no difference maker. There's no outfield difference maker in the system anywhere right now that's going to help the major league level. They don't exist. They're not out there. So you've got to go sign a guy.
And the interesting part, kind of comparing Santander and Teoscar Hernández, Santander, based on what he may be looking for, should be more palatable to the Reds than Hernández is, because Hernández made $23.5 million for the Dodgers this past season. It was a 1-year deal. It was a sort of a prove-it deal, but also, I mean, it's more expensive than a prove-it deal. I think it was because he was looking for a multi-year deal, didn't get a multi-year deal, and said, all right, give me that money for 1 year.
Let's talk about that too, because you're hitting on a point that's going to be pretty important in this offseason. And that is that Los Angeles Dodgers artificial manipulation of the market in what they did in free agency last year by taking that Shohei Ohtani contract and kicking it a decade down the road and pretending that it doesn't exist. I mean, they're only paying what? They're paying him $4 million of the 40, like 10% every year they're paying him, and the rest is deferred into the next decade.
Which it doesn't. The luxury tax is still what it would be,
right?
But essentially,
it left them all of this cash that they were like, oh, this is free money, and they gave players artificially inflated deals. Teoscar Hernandez's deal was one of those. In order to keep it a short amount of years, they gave him a big amount of money because they could afford to do it. So that's an artificial number. And the question is, does the market reset on him? Does it come back down? Is he going to be willing to accept what is not an artificially inflated number? That's going to be something interesting to pay attention to, not only with him, but the rest of that outfield market now, given that those kind of numbers got thrown around last season.
Well, and I think you can buy out that big number with years. And that'll be the biggest question, is how many years are the Reds willing to give? Because in years past, I mean, the Jeimer Candelario deal was at least a little bit surprising, not because they signed another infielder when they already had 20. It's because they gave him 3 guaranteed years with an option year on top of that, possibility of it being a 4-year deal. Now, we don't necessarily believe that it will be a 4-year deal, but it's 3 years that you got to pay him no matter what you do. So I kind of feel like that 4-year range might be their cutoff. I don't know that a 5-year deal, kind of like you mentioned with your proposed thing for Santander, I don't know that 5 years is within their realm, but that may be what they need to do to get a deal done with a guy like Teoscar Hernández.
Does 4 years get us to the expiration of the CBA? 4 years gets us there, right?
Well, I think it's only 2 years, because I think it's up after 2026. So
yeah. I think that's a consideration as well. I think a lot of teams are going to be reluctant to pull the trigger on multi-year long
probably
deals.
Why they were last offseason too. Yeah.
When they don't know what the financial future actually looks like. So it's going to be hard to do this. But this is what I know, Jeff. They can't use any of these things as excuses to not go and get an outfielder. You have to go get an outfielder. Now, let me ask you this. Is one outfielder enough? We've kicked this around a little bit. We've kicked the tires on this a few times before as the season was winding down. I think they need 2, and I think you got to go and trade for 1.
We talked a little bit yesterday, or I talked a little bit yesterday on the show without you, that, a passing grade is 1 outfielder. If you want to go for an A this offseason, Nick, get 2. At least get 2 outfielders, and then you get some other pieces as well. But you don't get an A without getting 2 outfielders. And what that second outfielder be, what might look like, they're not going to get Santander and Hernandez. It would probably be Santander and then a lower level guy, like maybe you do talk about Tommy Pham at that point. point, maybe you could package together Santander and Tyler O'Neill. That would be very fun. Santander and maybe you get a Jerkson Profar, although he only made $1 million last year and he had a heck of a season, so he's not going to just get a little increase. It's gonna be a pretty substantial increase.
Do you trade prospect capital, and is it a big package? Are you willing to trade Cam Collier and go get an outfielder? Are you willing to trade Chase Petty and go package him with somebody else? I mean, it's gonna be painful. Is where I'm going with this.
So what if it's you trade Cam Collier in a big package for your big outfielder, and then you go sign like Jesse Winker for your second outfielder?
I mean, I hope that that's not what they do for the second outfielder, but
I don't want that to be.
I mean, I'm there has to be a press conference where the outfielder brought to this ball club. So if they can't get Santander or Hernandez to sign, and really those are the two needle movers for me. Like the rest of the guys on that list, there's some good outfielders on that list, but those are the two press conference breaking news. You and I doing an emergency podcast announcement that they signed one of those two guys.
I could be convinced, and he's a guy that I need to do more digging into. I've dug a lot into Teoscar and Santander. Michael Conforto could be interesting as well, although he didn't have as good a year last year as our other two guys in the last couple of years, really. Okay, anyway, and that's a whole nother thing. We'll talk about that a little bit later on this offseason, because now we need to look at this because we're talking about going and getting outfielders. Well, the Reds have a couple of guys on their roster already, don't they? I mean, they got Jake Fraley. Jake Fraley's up for arbitration, and he's got an interesting number attached to him that is he an obvious choice to return? I think he is, but it's not going to be in a bigger role. I'll tell you why coming up here in a minute. You can get a big return this NFL season over on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same place where you place your bets over at FanDuel. And plus, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet, i.e., you don't even have to win. You place a $5 bet, you get $200 in bonus bets. The World Series is set, and look, regardless of how much we all hate the Dodgers and the Yankees, I think we can all agree that we're, seeing Shohei Ohtani and Aaron Judge in the World Series is objectively cool. With that, FanDuel has interesting odds set on the World Series going to 7 games. Right now, it's at plus 190. So wagering $10 would get you $19 if the World Series did, in fact, go to 7 games. And look, I want more baseball, so yes, I want that to happen. Let's go over 6.5 games. That's over on FanDuel.com. If you can't watch us here on YouTube, make sure you take us with you on your favorite podcast audio app out there. We're literally on all of them, so make sure you subscribe today. All right, Steve, we talked a lot about, should Santiago Espinal stay or go, and what that really means to the big picture of the offseason, looking at what an outfielder or what outfielders the Reds could go get. With all that being said, there's the Jake Fraley of it all. Jake Fraley's been here a couple of years. He's been a big part of this organization for the past few years. And I believe that he has a role on this team. The interesting part about it is he is being projected by both MLB Trade Rumors and Spot Track, the two websites we use during the offseason to kind of project arbitration numbers, project free agent numbers, although they haven't come out with the free agent numbers just yet. But all that stuff. They have him between $3 and $4 million next year. So with that, is it something that is palatable, you think?
I could go either way on this, Jeff. First off, let's frame this. He's a fourth or fifth outfielder only. We're not talking about him being a platoon starter. If he's a platoon starter, Nick Krall failed. Jake Fraley's a spare part, an extra guy, fourth or fifth outfielder. $3 to $4 million for that. Same argument that I had for Santiago Espinal, I'll make for Jake Fraley. He's a valuable guy to keep around at that price. I might be willing to gamble with him a little bit, though. I might be willing to non-tender him, but then immediately try and bring him back on a deal that's a little bit more team friendly, maybe an extra year with a mutual option, something like that. His numbers weren't horrible last year in a year that was horrible for him personally, Jeff.
Mhm.
He 277, 330, 386. Slugging was way, way down. He only hit 5 home runs on the year, most of those coming in garbage time at the end of the season after everything was pretty lost. Still managed a 95 OPS plus, so 5% below league average, even with his sudden absence of power. On his career, he still profiles as 101 OPS plus, 1% above league
Mhm.
average, so slightly better than league average still, even with that bad year under his belt. I can see this going either way. I would like for Fraley to be around. I would like him to be that fourth or fifth outfielder off the bench. If you're not willing to risk him going someplace else, if you're not willing to risk a non-tender, and you can stomach that $4 million, $3 to $4 million, then yeah, just keep him around. It would be his age 30 season, so he's still got some baseball left in that tank. So um, I could go either way on this, Jeff. I want him
I
here. I don't know that the $1 million you might save is worth the risk of exposing him.
right. And that's the interesting part of this. Like, could there be something, because once a guy becomes a free agent, there's about 5 days with which his team has the ability to negotiate with him. Um, which no, I take it back. I think that's actually like if you just become a free agent, not if you get non-tendered. But the thing is, like, could it be a turnaround where it's like, all right, we're not going to give you 1 year for 3 or 4, we're going to give you 2 years for 4, and so they cut $1 million off that number, and
Or
include they
incentives. You can add incentives to the deal. You can do a
right,
lot of
right,
things
right.
if you're structuring a non-arbitration contract, right? You can do a lot of things.
Because if I mean, in a perfect world, he marriages his 2024 batting average with his 2023 slugging, and then we're talking about a pretty good outfielder. He's not that far off, so maybe he's the guy. Let's put it this way: if you had to keep one, Espinal or Fraley, who you keep? Because I'm picking Fraley.
Yeah, I'd probably keep Fraley because he's a little bit more dangerous off the bench with his bat. So I think I'd keep Fraley if I could only keep one.
But I agree with you that it needs to be as the fourth outfielder, not as the guy that we're counting on to be an everyday guy, because he's shown he can't hit lefties. That's just a thing. It's just not going to
Mhm.
happen. But you can employ him against righties strategically and effectively, and I think, I think we, I really think that they understand that. So moving forward, I would like to see this be a little bit more of a restructured deal, not a straight this or gone. I do think they could probably negotiate a little bit with him, but I don't necessarily know that the moment he's non-tender, there's a ton of people lining up to go. Maybe Seattle does to see if they could bring him back, but with all of the options on the free agent list already, I don't know that you're ranking Jake Fraley in the must call immediately list.
Right. No, I think the thing though is that same market might also make him very attractive to a team that knows they can't go out and get a Juan Soto or a Teoscar Hernandez or a Anthony Santander, but they can throw $5 million at Jake Fraley and he's going to be their outfielder. I don't know. I
Pittsburgh.
don't know if I don't know if I'm willing to risk it. That's just really I just don't know.
Pittsburgh just for some reason just jumps out to me like the team that could be that team that calls him immediately. I don't know. I think probably in this instance, especially if I get my way with Espinal, if you're not going to do that with Espinal, then probably you do that with Jake Fraley, not to risk it. And maybe you negotiate another year on top of that and just say we're going to keep you at $3 million for the next 2 years or something, and get him like $6 million total. Anyway, that's kind of where I am with Jake Fraley. He should be the fourth outfielder. The Reds outfield should get better through free agency, and that's the goal of this off season. And that is where we will wrap up today's episode. Thanks so much for checking out today's Locked On Reds podcast. Make sure that you are subscribed on your favorite podcast audio app and right here on YouTube, because we're going to be talking Reds every single day, all throughout the offseason, getting you ready for 2025, because we are Locked On Reds every single day.